Buddy. I think many of you can see us on WebEx, most of you can see us on YouTube. Today we are discussing urban governance or innovation for urban India in the Indian smart cities. My name is Mudit Narayan. I am the Chief Technology Officer in the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to Government of India. And my role here is to hopefully evoke a provocative conversation around what India needs for urban technology adoption, as well as share with you the new system and procurement methodologies that have been developed by the Smart Cities mission called SmartProcure with a platform called CIX attached to it. I have a galaxy of speakers across smart city leaders, innovators, and investors in the urban governance space. I'll be introducing the speakers as I call upon them to speak, and I'll be asking them hard questions, but I'll also leave enough time for them to open up outside of my questions and hopefully take some questions from the participants today. And we have a very happy gender balance today, but still in terms of roles, I'm starting off with a gent. So Raj Cherubal is the CEO of the Chennai Smart City SPV, and he's a trained physicist and has had a varied experience across software and urban governance. So Raj, let me start off by asking you two things. One, what is your perception of where do Indian cities stand when it comes to technology adoption, technology, product, solution, service, however you want to describe them? And second, take me through one example of a technology or product, which you would have wanted to implement in your city, Chennai, or any other place that you worked, but you were unable to for some reason. So those two questions, and let's start it off.
First of all, thank you. Time topic. I think I speak for everybody when I say most Indian cities are a big. When it comes to basic infrastructure, tree cover, garbage, a lot of mess out there. And I say this in every seminar that look at cities like Hong Kong, and I like to compare apple to apple, Chennai to Hong Kong, Chennai to Shanghai, instead of country to country, because it doesn't give you the right one. Can Chennai become a Hong Kong? Can Chennai become a Shanghai? Or any other favorite city that you don't talk of. The question is, most countries, those cities have had hundreds of years. We don't have that much time to sit back.
Raj, sorry for interrupting you for 1 second. Yeah. Do you want to hold up the mic closer to your mouth?
Oh, okay, sure.
It's slightly faint.
Can you hear me properly? Yeah. Yes, so I think the issue is, can we innovate our way out of this troubles we are in terms of urban governance? And instead of thinking traditionally where you go the concrete and steel route, traditional planning, and so on, which the other cities did. Singapore may have done that for 70 years. London has done it for probably, I don't know, hundreds of years and so on. Can we leapfrog? We have to leapfrog in terms of sewage, in terms of garbage, in terms of various other issues, and also in terms of democracy and governance. So the question I think I heard you ask earlier, can we take governance to the public, to the citizen in each street? Can they start taking charge of their streets, taking charge of their community so that they can contribute rather than be spectators? So it's a very complicated situation that we are in, and with a lot of hope and a lot of course, pessimism, skepticism, and so on. I hope it'll be skepticism and pessimism, not cynicism, because there's a lot of good change happening in the country. So technology clearly can make a difference. So for example, take the recent floods of Chennai, for example. Can we start helping the administrators and the citizens for that matter through mapping, through various other mechanisms, data analytics, and so on, to be able to proactively start planning? So today our cities are very reactive, right? Because of the lack of staffing, lack of resources, commissioners, they work extremely hard. I mean, that's one thing about Indian bureaucrats and officials and engineers I've seen. They work really, really hard. But a lot of that also can be because of lack of tools, lack of project management tools, lack of data. So think of yourself as a commissioner of a city, right? You're not interested in data. You're not interested in cloud or this and that, innovation, etc. What you want to know is, okay, fine, tomorrow rain is coming. What am I supposed to do? Which stormwater hasn't been dredged properly? Which river mouth hasn't been dredged properly? Or, which are the areas where I need to put motors proactively? I'm just talking about just one thin slice of urban governance. So imagine the same thing happens whether it is cattle in the city to tree planting, positive and negative stuff for that matter. So I think data and innovation through whether it's engine analytics camera, through IoT devices, through satellite and drone technology, I think instead of being enamored by technology, I rather look at it from a use case and SOP point of view. So what does the commissioner want to see? What does the assistant engineer on the zone in the zone or ward wants to see on a daily basis? Can they work much less and do much more, right? That's what a Singapore official would do. It's, I mean, no, even in a startup, even in a private company, I always used to say, I mean, working 20 hours a day is not the glory of it. Well, what did you achieve out of it? Did you get the job done? And from that perspective, I think there's a lot of, we're putting a lot of strain on our officials, whether it's traffic police, whether it is, a corporation engineer, PWD engineer, and so on, because lack of data technology, etc., is making them work really, really hard and to some extent unproductive in a very reactive mode. Of course, all operations are somewhat reactive, but good cities also become proactive. They're able to predict things, or past data will tell you, okay, put a motor there, put a 100 HP motor here, put a 5 HP motor there, water needs to go from east to west. Today, I think there's a lot of ad hoc way of governing our city, whether it's garbage or water. So the gist of it is that we have a lot of way to go. And I think technology, I've always said, is that we could do 80-20. Like, how do we do 80% of our effort and get 20% of our effort and get 80% results out of it? And this is where I think data and technology comes in, rather than the brute force approach that we have today. Is there a clever and or lack of a word, a smarter way of governing, in all aspects? And I don't want to sound very technocratic. I'm also talking in a very democratic and people participation point of view. Also, for example, from a participation point of view, it's very easy to say stakeholder participation, citizen participation, but it is not simply that, okay, we all go stand on the road and start participating, right? There has to be some structured way of giving feedback to public, because I may complain about something once, I may give suggestion once, twice, thrice, but beyond a point, I'm just going to get frustrated and saying, okay, forget it. It's pointless. There's no response, right? So there has to be complaint management in a very smart way, in a more encouraging and positive way. So you build on the citizens' energies, build on NGOs, and help them achieve more. So I think long way to go. I mean, absolutely long way to go. In terms of technology, what I would like to have implemented, it's all of the above. It's city is like everything in parallel, right? It's not like one thing happening per day. Every day, everything is happening. So whatever I said about flooding, tomorrow it'll be garbage. So the day after tomorrow, it may be, stray dog population. How do you humanely manage stray dogs and make sure that they are humanely treated? At the same time, the population slowly starts coming down through scientific mechanisms. It could be tree planting and for climate change reasons. There's so many other things to be done. It could be going one step ahead and saying, let's start making money from carbon credits and investments in green technologies. So it's all of the above. You cannot put things into silo and say, I'm going to solve this problem or that problem. But we have to do things in parallel. And ultimately, like any software developer, I like to think from a client. What does a client see? In this case, maybe a commissioner or an engineer or a citizen. What do they want to see on their desktop and their handheld? How can we make their life so easy that with a click of a button, they should be able to solve what would have taken hours or weeks and months, should be able to solve it in a much more efficient manner. So we can use our productive energy for something, more positive and for, something that human beings want to spend their time on.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. I got some points on how cities and officials are reactive, and unfortunately so, how we make it easier. I did get 4 points: flooding, solid waste, stray dog, tree planting. I think relevant in all cities. Before I go on to the speakers, let me take a minute to talk about, please excuse my voice, to talk about the smart city new effort on smart procurement and CIX, the City Innovation Exchange, which is an experiment in a sense to solve the problems, the kind of problems that Raj talked about. And this is it is a change in guidelines on how cities can procure, enabled by a platform. And that platform is like any marketplace, two-sided, suppliers of technology and users of technology. But for once, we are using the word solutions rather than the word technology, because every technology has to be contextualized for that city's need. And what this platform allows you to do is put up your technology and say, as an innovator, here are the 4 or 5 things that I'm willing to do, or one problem that I'm willing to solve. And then it allows the cities to identify their context, their constraints, their limitations, and work together to develop a solution. But as we are in a democratic country, we need to have the 3 requirements of transparency, equal access, and non-favoritism. So this platform also allows you to get some price discovery. And there are different thresholds at which different kinds of contracts can be given, with the intent that you support innovation, you support Indian entrepreneurship, and you get new technologies which are contextualized for that city. I invite you to look up CIX, City Innovation Exchange. The social media handles have a lot of conversation going on around that topic. And hopefully in next year's Innovation Week, or in a couple of years, we'll have examples of CEOs like Raj who are able to use this platform to identify, adopt, and customize technologies for their cities into products. So just a little spiel, because that brings together the conversation on why we are doing this today. Now I'll move on to, we haven't heard from Dr. Mittal, have we? Akriti? Okay.
No, we're still waiting for a response from her end.
Right. So Raj, I think, talked on behalf of the entire Smart City leadership. What I'll now move on to our 2 innovators in the space. We have Amarsh Chaturvedi and Antara Vasudev, 2 slightly different focuses. Antara, let me start with you. And Raj talked about how democratization is not a very easy road to walk on, and it has different perceptions for different people. Tell us about your work, and specifically tell us about your experience of working with Indian cities, and then we'll come to Amarsh. And let me, sorry, I should have taken 1 more minute to introduce Antara's entity called Civic Vote, and it works at the interface of technology, governance, urban governance, and public consultations. Antara.
Thank you so much, Mudit, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning. I think, like Mr. Charubal mentioned, effective civic engagement in cities, which anyway are quite complex ecosystems in their own, is quite a challenging task that needs to be done in a way that it is streamlined. I think as citizens, there are rising expectations of engaging more with government, especially amongst younger citizens, far younger than myself as well. And that is something to think about and design for in terms of the next 10 to 15 years, in terms of how we're creating systems for effective civic engagement. Civis, for its part, works on the public consultation process. We enable urban leaders as well as other leaders from different government bodies to seek constructive inputs from the lived experiences of citizens and translate that into policy documents that they may be forming for those cities. I think one of the most interesting experiments to your question, Mudit, has been in urban cities. I think because of the levels of engagement that we have, right from our councillors to our corporators to the municipalities themselves, we have the ability to engage and in a microcosm almost see the input and output cycle of effective civic engagement take place very quickly. However, that being said, I think there is a lot of work that also needs to be building citizens' muscle to be able to solve urban challenges participatorily and working with governments. So as Mr. Charubal mentioned, rather than just being a spectator or going the other extreme of putting everything aside, innovator, I think we need to acknowledge the capacity of every citizen in their everyday to be able to engage with government systems. To give a small example, anytime that we have needed to walk into a ward office in Mumbai, we have always been welcomed, always been sat down, spoken to, discussed, understood the problems, and then actually seeing that come, understanding the challenges on the flip side as well, and seeing that that problem being solved. It does happen. It happens quite frequently. I think the one challenge is to take that first step to know who you should be speaking to about a specific issue as a citizen, to make that effort to go into their office, speak to them, and actually get to know them a little bit, not from a obstructionist point of view, but rather understanding what it is, working working with the patients to realize that this problem may not be solved overnight. It may take slightly longer. It is perhaps something which is a little bit more systemic and needs a little bit more patience. But how can we as citizens engage with that process more constructively and actually help see it bear fruition? So to sort of bring together what I've been trying to talk about is that there is the ability of every citizen to engage very constructively with urban local bodies. In my experience, this has been welcomed, in fact, and has been something that has been encouraged by ULBs in the ones that we have interacted with. However, as citizens, we also need to build that muscle to know that success doesn't come easy, for a variety of challenges that are plaguing cities in India. But at the same time, when it is success that comes through, it's not just your life that is impacted, but perhaps lives of a couple of 100,000 people like yourselves. And that makes it worth the effort to go out there as a citizen, find out who your cooperator is, engage with them, go sit, have a cup of chai. There will be some fantastic chai that you will get at any cooperator's office. So stop by, engage with them, understand their challenges, and see how you can do your part rather than standing on the sidelines and watching things unfold.
Thank you, Antara. Yeah, democracy is a two-way street. It's worth the distance if you follow the rules. I come to Amarsh Chaturvedi from Transerv, who's passionate in developing technology stacks to solve key urban challenges and has worked with stakeholders in this field. He's a civil engineer from IIT Kanpur and has worked across technologies like geospatial analytics and machine learning. Amarsh, if you talk about your experience of integrating technology in service delivery, in urban service delivery, what has worked in the past, what has changed in the recent past, and where do you see startups playing a role? What is the focus of startups in bringing those technologies to urban service delivery?
Sure. Thanks, Mudit, and it's great to be here this morning. Transerv essentially has been working in two key areas in providing technology-enabled urban solutions. The first one is revenue augmentation, which most of our cities actually badly need because the urban finances, the city finances have always been a big trouble area for our cities. This is something that badly needs tech enablement and also analytics so that cities can actually focus on getting their dues or their actual share of revenue from the areas that they are managing. The second area where Transerv works on and focuses a lot on is urban sanitation, and primarily from the standpoint of areas in larger cities which are not connected by connected sewer networks, and also the smaller cities where we do not have a connected sewer network and we are still relying on septic tanks and the processes related to cleaning of those septic tanks, etc. So we picked up these couple of areas because we saw that there was a huge gap in the market when it comes to trying to solve problems in these two domains. When we started off, we realized that spatial technology or geospatial technology can be a game changer when it comes to solving the problems like these. However, the market had solutions which were in this domain, but they needed to be customized, they needed to be developed for specific use cases. And like how Mr. Raj clearly explained, cities are not actually looking for black boxes. They are looking for solutions to solve their specific problems. And hence our effort always was to present the solution, which is, click and use, rather than, develop something, sit on it, float an RFP for customization and then, see the solutions when the tenure of a commissioner is about to end. So, that is something that we wanted to avoid right from day one. So our experience of working with cities has been a mixed bag, I would say, because selling such solutions which have not been present in the market, and specifically the problem areas which probably may not be on the topmost priorities for the city management, but also a couple of things that we faced. There were cities which really wanted to focus on these kind of problems, and we were received well. But at the same time, with different kinds of missions coming in, different kinds of budgets coming in for specific problems, we saw that the priorities actually, swayed according to, the flavor of the season, as I call it. So, and hence, from a prioritization perspective, though, we at Transerv always felt that these are like hard pressing issues that need to be solved. We saw a mixed response from the cities on prioritizing these problems to be solved. Second challenge that we always faced, and I think that's why we are here today, and which is the problem of procurement. And that is for a new company which does not have a lot of credentials, and you always start small. So as a company, you find a city which is small enough where you can actually demonstrate the power of your technology, or you pick up a small zone or a ward or a pilot area in a larger city where you can demonstrate something suiting to your scale. And then if you try to scale that up, the problems that typically came in were mostly centered around how we sort of sail through the procurement process that existed, and hence that was one of the key challenges that we faced. At the same time, we are, in the ecosystem, there are always like-minded, partners with whom we could collaborate. There were grant-making agencies. There were, a lot of such agencies which were directly working or with these state governments or the urban, directly with the urban governance as well, where we could partner with them and then provide these solutions. So, as an entrepreneur, you always have to find ways to solve all of your business problems, and procurement is something that we've sort of tried to solve through, finding various channels through which we can actually sell our solutions to the cities and try to solve their problems.
Thank you. That's quite across sectors and across kinds of challenges. Hopefully the procurement problem is what CIX and SmartProcure are trying to solve. And as you said, nobody looks for that smartest widget. It's about how that widget augments and enhances your service delivery, your urban services in that city, is what the smart city CEO is looking at. And that's what the SmartProcure system is oriented towards doing. It's very easy to buy technologies. It's very easy to buy products in the government system. It's very difficult for a leader, it could be urban governance, it could be any other sector, to say, we need this service using a new technology, come and solve that. And that's what this platform is oriented towards. So thanks for highlighting how these things work on the ground. Now I go to two individuals with very diverse experiences. We next have Charu Chadda, who's a principal in Omidyar Foundation in the governance and citizen engagement space. She's had very diverse experience across different geographies, different sectors like utilities, healthcare, and as well as academia. And she was most recently part of the public policy team at Facebook. She's trained as an architect and has worked with a variety of foundations. Charu, to me, of course, your opening remarks, but also a few thoughts on how you think startups can be the interface to bring social impact financing or social capital to improving citizens' lives. In terms of how do you see startups or innovation as a way of improving governance or providing new services?
Well, thank you so much for having me here. And I think very interesting discussion already in terms of just the polarity of the challenge we have. So I think maybe to start with two caveats and maybe then to the question more than two pace. I think when we think of technology, it's, most often we think of information technology, but technology procurement in a city is everything from an IT system to hardware to really capital intensive investments, right? Where you might be trying to set up a plant or something together. And therefore, across this bandwidth, I think there are different kinds of solutions and different roles for social capital to play. And the other is really to kind of think of procurement as a change management issue. Because if you were to loosely compare a city to a corporate, and a general MNC was going to bring on a new technology, it would have ripple effects through its HR system, through its processes. It would not just be just this technology comes in and everything else stays the same. And therefore, when we think of technology adoption within the city, we have to almost think of this as a change management. And that's really where the question comes in on what is the right way of doing this. And in your earlier comment, I think you captured it. It's not about just procurement. It's actually about how will it get customized, what would lead to adoption. And this range is where, I think there's a lot of opportunity for both philanthropic capital, but also impact investment capital to play a role. Because I think the core for profit actually comes very much at the end, right? Where a technology is kind of ready to be scaled. There's an understanding of how it will impact the system. It can go from one city to the other. But before it does that, this entire room of how will it pilot, what will it change within the city, that's really where we kind of need to look at other forms of capital play a role. Otherwise, we're almost all of us are kind of familiar with, we figured out the first pilot and then we didn't know what to do. But equally, I think that kind of requires a need for creating that place to fail, right? Like one of the things you have to recognize is that unlike normal innovation, where failure is okay, but in a city, there's just, or with any government, I think there's a much higher level of accountability, right? So therefore, failure isn't actually that easy. If my payment doesn't go through on any online platform like Swiggy, etc., it's okay, whatever. But if my bill pay doesn't go through, that's actually a much bigger issue. Therefore, almost there's like this need of this co-creation space where we can, and I don't know whether it's a space that should be created outside, whether it's a space that the city creates, but I think that creation of that space is where I think both the outside capital makes a lot of sense and also gives the city breathing room, right? I mean, if you're fighting all these fires and then you're also supposed to deal with failure, that's just a lot to ask of anybody. I'll stop there. And
Absolutely, and those are some very interesting threads as social capital as an enabler of change and pilots and procurement as a change management issue. I think that's a very interesting framing. If I can quickly talk about, again, how failure is being integrated into the SmartProcure system. The idea is to have a system which allows experimentation. I have a very good friend in Niti Aayog who's using this phrase, which I'm very impressed with, which says, startups are the only way India is taking a risk right now. And incorporating that, the SmartProcure system allows cities to take some risk, allows startups to take that space to take some risk, with some risk sharing across in the contract to allow new ideas to be tried out. And this, of course, in a country with such strong accountability mechanisms, you have to make sure that there is transparency, equal access, non-favoritism, along with the space to fail. And that's what the procurement system is trying to balance. Finally, but not last but not the least, Madhushri Narayan is from Social Alpha. She's a director of waste management there. She has a background in managing programs in pursuing climate change research and implementation, and has worked with a variety of bodies in the climate space. Madhushri, if I was to ask you both as an incubator and as an investor, how do you see startups or innovators generally addressing the environmental space in cities and otherwise? And how do you see this transition in the last few years or going forward? And your thoughts on the interaction between environmental sustainability and urban governance in India?
Thanks, Mudit. Thanks for having us here today. How do I see startups playing a key role in addressing these challenges, right? I think by a sense, the design of what startups stand for when you're looking at building business sustainability or even operational scalability to address a particular challenge, that in itself addresses some of the critical challenges that we face, be it climate resiliency in urban areas or any other sort of livelihood challenges we're facing across different sectors. So I think when we're looking at startups, even when we're looking to support to incubate or invest in them, some of the key criteria that we focus on is ensuring that the business models are sustainable beyond a certain point of time as well. So looking at ensuring that they have the right kind of ecosystem support to get to a place where they're sustainable, and then infusing equity capital into them to help establish that. So startups, I think they're uniquely sort of poised to really create a lasting impact, because they're combining both the kind of work what we're seeing a lot of the not-for-profits doing on ground, but also including a business model which will ensure that they sustain beyond the whole grant-making time period as well. In terms of transition in the last few years, I think the smart procurement guidelines and the city innovation platform in itself is a very good example, right? I think 3-4 years ago, when we used to run programs for early stage startups, a part of the incubation support was always trying to enable pilots with cities, enable pilots with ULBs or different departments for early stage startups, right? Because there's always a little bit of a hesitation to allow early stage startups to pilot with cities. And we've previously run a lot of programs where, we've brought in private capital who are helping build resources. They're probably funding the pilots, but we wanted those startups to implement those solutions on ground, either with the water department or even looking at, particular ULBs or even waste management. Sometimes it took off, sometimes it took a really long time in the gestation period, sort of, just discourage the startup, or, there was change in different governance systems. So a lot of this was quite sort of, ad hoc, right? But today, I think the change that we're seeing is that, the government's coming up with smart procurement guidelines. You have the CIX platform in place, which not just helps curate specific problem statements at city levels, allowing different city administrations to put up problem statements and say, hey, these are the challenges we're facing in a particular city. Can we look for solutions who can come and help find it with us? I think that's really good to see the kind of systemic change.
I can't hear her. Can the others? I lost your voice for a second.
Sorry, am I audible now?
Yeah, we lost you for the last, let's say, 20-25 seconds.
Okay. So I just want to quickly come to what we're doing in the whole, your question about the climate and sustainability intersection, right? To me, because again, for me, when I see all the work that we're doing across Social Alpha, or all our ecosystem partners are doing, right? Everything encompasses something we're doing in the climate space, either mitigating the challenges we're facing because of climate change, or adapting, different cities or communities or biodiversity to the changing climatic patterns. So even today at Social Alpha, I think a lot of the work we do, be it across water, sanitation, pollution, air, water, or waste management, municipal governance. Now,
Better. Something goes off. Maybe there's a loose wire somewhere.
no, so just sort of ending a lot of startups that we actually all the startups we address climate mitigation. Sustainability, I think, is an inherent component of it. It could be looking at lowering greenhouse gas emissions. It's a very sort of visible impact of when it comes to climate change.
Madhushri, maybe you just want to take off your headpiece. Go with your device directly. I think there's a loose connection somewhere.
Any better now?
Much better, yeah.
Okay. So I don't know where you lost me. Sorry, Mudit.
It was intermittent, but I think we got the broad gist.
Okay.
If you want to summarize in one quick sentence.
I think one quick sentence summarizing is, climate action and sustainability are inherent in a lot of, all the innovations we see today, either directly or indirectly. So I'd like to take a quick pause with that.
Thank you. That's actually very good to know, right on Startups Day, that our country's startups, innovators are thinking not just about their businesses, but about environmental sustainability as a whole. I think that bodes well for the country, for our society, and the systems very well. Before I go to questions and open the conversation, any reactions to each other's points? Very often when I'm on panels, what others are saying spurs more thoughts during the panel. So let me give you all a couple of minutes if you have thoughts inspired by each other, if you want to add on a few points. And I can start with Raj just because he's had the most time to think about others. The points.
I think this issue of procurement has been discussed a lot. I don't see immediate solutions. I'm very happy that you guys are coming up with practical ways of solving this problem. Typical same, the city cannot take risk, or city doesn't know if the solution works. City's tendering system doesn't suit going and getting some unknown startup product and so on and so forth. This is a known problem. So and it gets somewhat frustrating after some time. So there has to be a better way of procuring. And I always used to joke that I wish I was a super rich guy who could just take money out of my pocket and buy stuff for Chennai. And one man startup environment, or incubator or something like that. But it's good to see all these incubators and others coming forward to solve this problem. And I think government also has set up startup funding mechanism, which are separate and different from typical tendering process. One suggestion to all of you is that, and this is something I've told other startups and incubators, that feel free to come to Chennai. We have an innovation hub, and if you need a place, a sandbox to try out stuff with respect to permission, we can't give you any money because, as you know, 1 rupee requires endless paperwork. But what we can do is, you want sewage, we have sewage. You want garbage, we have garbage. You want space to put your XYZ product to make sewage into clean drinking water, we have space for you. So we'll do our best. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'm sure there are a few other cities who are equally welcoming. You need to try this out, prove in India that it works. Otherwise, it seems to get lost in the chaos, right? Everybody comes and says, I got this amazing product, and then they disappear. Or you get frustrated with my side of the system, where we just say, yes, great, we've got a great product, and we don't do anything for you. So I think we have some mechanism, including CIX and so on. And on our side, we have Innovation Hub, where the hope is that we will be like a sandbox for you, and you come, whether you're an incubator or a funder or a startup, let's try systematically on the ground solving some of these problems and failure for that matter. And one last challenge I'll throw at you is that, see, we have something called the command and control center, right? Now, the back of the command and control are proprietary softwares, private softwares, and so on. The challenge is, how do we do plug and play? So we don't have like a big software team sitting in Chennai waiting to integrate and do data integration, API integration, and all. Every step is a challenge for us, right? So we need to think in terms of, I'm sure IUDX is one such mechanism, but we need to be a little more robust about to say, okay, for example, if one of the startups comes and says, look, I got this fancy stuff, which will capture pollution data and plug it into our command and control center. It shouldn't become a 2-year project to figure out what is an API, who is an API, or what is the data, and so on and so forth. It should be somewhat of a plug and play where a city governance with no understanding of these issues should be able to benefit from it. It shouldn't be like a bunch of software guys and CTOs sitting there and trying to, do mega project management and so on. Without solving that, we are again stuck. So, for example, if we have an ERP system, it may be an ABC company, right? Let's say Pune has XYZ ERP system. Now, what are you going to do, right? If you have an ERP system related software or a product, you can't then spend chasing that company to figure out their API versus your API and then get programmers to sit and integrate. It is a major headache for us. So let's think in terms of layers where just plug and play and some interoperability and so on and so forth. We have to solve some of these problems. And I suspect private sectors to some extent maybe have solved it. I don't know if it's there already. But we have to think as much as procurement. See, for example, sometimes procurement can also be a non-financial model, right? There are many private sector models where you don't pay anything. Somehow they make money, some other mechanism. So even a product like that, it's very difficult for us to integrate right now because I need to find somebody on both sides who can integrate this product into existing system. So I think maybe take a city or two and try to fit some of these, let's say 10, 20, 50 products into the system, make it work. make it work for the citizen, make it work for the average engineer who doesn't understand what you're talking about, or average official who's busy and don't want to worry about startup versus big company. Let's prove this entire framework work end to end. And then I suspect you will be able to deploy and scale into any part of the city, any part of the country.
Thank you. Thank you. Very thought-provoking points. I'm sure Kunal Kumar, the Joint Secretary of Smart Cities Mission, the Mission Director of Smart Cities Mission, is probably listening and has taken notes. His the project that mentioned, the Indian Urban Data Exchange, tried to solve some of those issues. But I think there are some pointers in your requirements as a city leader, which I'm sure the IUDX team and the broader Smart Cities team can take pointers on. But if I can just take one point which connects what you're saying and what Charu was saying earlier, is on the interface between technology as we think about when it comes to IT technologies and hard technologies, what people call it deep tech, hard tech, tangible tech. Friends of mine call it tough tech. I think the interface between sensors or tough tech and APIs will really need to be managed very well. And the design of smart city, the SmartProcure system or the CIX system was done to ensure that we are opening the space not just for IT interventions, for which there is enough space and there is IUDX and others, but there is also, sorry, there is space and there's an attraction for the tough tech entrepreneurs to come in. We want better robots cleaning our sewers. We in fact want to do away with humans in any of those places. We want to do better management of our road surfaces, better management of waters. So those kinds of tough tech, and that's what the smart city CIX platform is designed to attract. And hopefully a lot more engineers, a lot more innovators will start thinking about those solutions and have the data from coming from sensors or from which can be integrated through APIs into our command control systems or our information dashboards. So both those things are being addressed, attracted. And as you said, and this is I think an open call to all innovators listening, there are enough challenges in our cities. Raj mentioned a few in Chennai. I'm sure almost all of them are common across most cities. And the CIX platform gives you that sandbox, that safe space to try out, not just in Chennai, but in others. But since he's here and he's inviting you, maybe this is the place to start with. But all cities, I think, should be open to accept your solutions through this platform. Any others who have thoughts on others panelists before I open up for more questions? Okay, so I do have a question for all the panelists, and feel free to jump on it, which is that we've heard feedback that building for legacy solutions can often be very difficult. It's cost intensive. Are there ideas on how cities can offer support to startups, whether it is through data, whether it is through some other manner of assistance, to help integrate technologies into legacy systems? That's going to be a running challenge across all geographies, across all environments. So thoughts on that? And feel free to jump, or I'll have a cold call.
I would jump in here because this is something that we are dealing with almost on a regular basis. So what we have seen is when it comes to, say, e-governance systems in the cities, and we definitely, since we are addressing two of these pressing problems, we definitely need to sort of feed on to the existing data sets which are present. The data is actually not uniform. So what I see in, say, a city in Karnataka and what I see in a city in Bihar are way different from each other. So data standardization is one key area where things have not been very uniform when it comes to the legacy systems, and that is one area where most of the effort of data management or data preparation tasks, as we call it, takes a lot of time. I know that there are a few set of efforts that are being going on, and this is also we see that as a light at the end of the tunnel, because there are standard ERP systems now being placed at state levels for all the cities rather than individual cities going for their own system. So that brings a certain level of standardization, at least for the cities which are present in one particular state. In addition to that, there is one major change which the central government, as far as my knowledge goes, is trying to achieve, is also to bring in the national urban platform, which is intended to be one common platform and one common architecture to sort of plug into and work on it. So these are two areas where we've seen changes are happening, and we're quite happy about it, because this is something that we have dealt with in the past and has been a major challenge.
Thank you. Yeah, data standardization management, I think, is in any organization, in any kind of organization, is always an ongoing challenge. And I have never seen a situation where it's consistent and keeps everyone happy. Between regulation and innovation, there's always that running battle. But point taken that it needs a lot more effort to have some standardization, at least at a minimum common denominator level. Anybody else who wants to join in that? Otherwise, Sukhbir is bombing me with more questions.
I think just the point would be that many of the systems are coming up with
Raj, your mic closer to your mouth, please.
We're trying very hard to kind of put most of the data onto a data portal, APIs and raw data and so on. Every consultant that's doing pretty huge projects in Chennai, we're insisting that they put all the data into the data portal. So at least whether you're a citizen, NGO, a startup, academic, whoever you may be, you should be able to access data from the portal. So that may be one first step to do. And then the other thing that we work with Trinity in Bangalore is our backend software for the command and control center. So they have come up with the dashboards, and like you can drag and drop and create your own dashboard using the data that's available. So whether it's a pollution sensor data or some other data, with very little understanding of computer science, etc., you should be able to create your own dashboard. You should be able to play with the different 2 or more data. Also, this is starting, but I don't know how this far this will go, but that they have machine language models available on their portal, so that let's say you have a bunch of data sets that we give you. You as a data scientist should be able to play with one of these models or your own model and come up with insights. And the hope is that you will help us kind of figure out things which our human brain cannot figure out, and then tell us the connection between very different data sets and how it's impacting citizens, or how we can solve problems and so on. These are some baby steps forward, but hopefully this will help.
Baby steps, but inspirational ideas and in an inspirational direction. Thank you, Raj. I think the next question is towards Madhushri and Charu. The question that is coming to us is, in the horizon, do we see our cities investing in startups directly? And is this a role they should take upon themselves as part of spearheading public sector innovation? Will it cause concerns of crowding out in the ecosystem? The question doesn't specify between project funding or equity funding, but I'll let you interpret it the way you want. And let me start with Madhushri.
I hope my voice doesn't give out here. Okay, great. So I think even if we take project funding in as an example here, right? I do see, of course, cities sort of coming into play a key role here. But I want to tackle the second half of the question, right? Which says, will it cause any concerns of crowding out in the ecosystem? Absolutely not. I think this is a question we're constantly also internally battling, because like, how many startups in the waste management processing space do we support? Is this one too many in the portfolio? But what we need to realize is that entire sector itself is quite vast, right? I mean, if you take Bangalore itself for an example, we're generating close to 5,000 tons per day, and that's on the lower end of the approximation, 5,000 tons of waste per day. But we're not even managing a small quantum of, or a small percentage of that. And this is, with the Bangalore city being extremely proactive in establishing infrastructure and processes in place to enable higher rates of waste management and segregation. So I think there's immense potential, to bring in different ecosystem players, be it the government, be it the private sector, whoever the stakeholders are, to support these startups, because I think there's a lot of opportunity within these spaces, especially a lot of the social and the environmental challenges that cities face, for many startups to come together and sort of, work in complementary nature to the government, with the government, of course. So I don't see challenges of overcrowding. Do we see cities investing in startups directly? We already have governments investing in startups directly through different programs, right? So there already is government support if you're talking about equity capital. But in terms of project management support, I think we see a lot of the private sector in cities also, joining hands with city administrations to enable this going ahead. We're seeing a lot of examples ourselves in waste and water space, where we're looking at, the private sector coming in to say, listen, we're going to help you scale up this technologies to tier 2, tier 3 cities. And that's been a very encouraging step in the positive direction. But yeah, I hope that answers your question, Charu. Sorry, Mudit.
No, and up to Charu now.
So I think it kind of comes down to what do cities get from investing, right? Are they looking at an alternate revenue stream? Is it a way of improving public service delivery? So I think to the second question, agree completely. I don't think there is going to be any crowding out, but I think it'll kind of come down to what is the value that the city generates out of it. I think see a lot of, co-funding with startups to set things up. And potentially maybe somewhere down the line, having funds as alternate revenue streams. But I think we'll, like everything else in the city space, right, we'll see a lot of new formats coming in, right? So maybe not the traditional venture capital or the traditional debt, but definitely some new forms of investing maybe coming up.
Thank you. What I'm hearing is that right now the opportunity is more to crowd in investment and maybe through project finance rather than crowd out. And that might lead to equity investments from other spaces. I strongly believe that the urban body or the whatever body is buying services should not be getting into equity financing. So let there be project financing from the cities. That'll crowd in investments from other private sector or maybe other players at different levels of government, and keep project and equity financing separate. But I think that's a very suitable point to bring in Antara to this conversation. Antara, when you talk about cities making decisions of technology, urban governance here, and when you have startups or technology providers providing technology, what do you see the role of the population and civic engagement, and how can it reflect the priorities of the city's population in technology services? And what is, if you maybe want to take some examples of good examples of engagement with the people to use technology in urban governance?
Thank you for that, Mudit. I think one of the interesting which startups actually help bridge that gap is that each one of us is perceiving or felt knowledge, then innovating upon and sharing with different government bodies. But one of the questions I think is that how do we access to that process of co-creation to a larger number of people, in the ability to help create perhaps a portal for management, manner that we are actually able to bring citizens' expectations to the table, not only post facto once the has been launched, but actually right from the inception to the product. I think there is a lot of work that is happening in this domain as well. When it comes to technology, successful technology implementation, though, I think the key things to keep in mind is that we still need to have a focus on our interfaces and our citizen-facing interfaces in terms of how much are we breaking down that particular process for people to get involved. So if it is for being of tax rate for us, everybody is well versed with UPI or technological, but is there a way perhaps that we can integrate actually, which is a little bit more intuitive to citizens? So I think that citizen lens comes from co-creation, but it is also happening in a lot of cities where, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, across the country, we had many examples of WhatsApp's different kinds of POS selection quite rapidly out just out of the fact that citizens could not then walk into a municipal office to pay their taxes and get their challans. So rapid innovation does take place in this space. I think making sure that citizen centricity is also one of the concerns that we're looking to leapfrog what is already happening to the next level.
Thank you. And hopefully we'll see some cities which are doing pilots through CIX adopt that system of taking citizen feedback or user feedback in it at an early stage. Thank you for that. In fact, it gives me some ideas on how the early pilots can be used to also take this idea across to outside the governance systems. Thank you. Sukhbir has sent a question for me, but I'll invite Charu also to add to that answer. Is thinking on the lines, is it time for thinking on the lines of a fund of funds for the urban sector? I think my answer latches on to a previous conversation we had on crowding out. I think dedicated funds of funds should be used very sparingly in very rare circumstances and only to kick things off. Or, I mean, when I say fund of fund, it's government investments in very specific targeted areas. More chances of that not reaching the intended objectives than of reaching them. But if designed properly, they could be used as a short-term window to get investments going. I give the example of the overall fund of funds in the country, that the idea was 10,000 crores in 3 years, and much before that, you had large companies coming in, and then the acquisition of Flipkart paid more taxes than the entire outlay of the fund of funds. So sometimes it's just the messaging that the government is doing this kind of a thing is enough to get things going. I think the Startup India movement is a very good example of how just public messaging 6 years ago, 2016, January 2016, got the idea that this is now an active area of interest to government, got the startup movement going. Look at the dividends that all of us are now reaping. So yes, maybe a fund of funds can be tried as a way of crowding in some more investments. But I'm sure investors such as Charu and others, Charu, Madhushri, and a lot more people are willing to look at good, interesting technology startups serving the urban needs in the country. And it might just need that little kindling from the public side. But thoughts before I start wrapping up, Madhushri or Charu, on this topic? Let me take it to Charu, actually.
So I think completely agree with you on this one. I think when more than funding, I think when the government signals that it's interested, I think that's a really strong signal. It will bring in much more funding. And also, I think in some ways, funding of the right kind, right, which should be taking risk and which should be kind of going out and expanding the ecosystem. But a government signal is sometimes very good. It does not, I mean, it almost does not necessarily need to back up with funding. I think sometimes when it kind of backs up with access, that's actually much harder to get. I think funding is the easier part of the solution.
All right, completely agree. Any others who want to jump in at this point? I think the consensus here between Charu and I is that messaging and signaling is more important. I'm actually a strong votary that money comes in. You might need it a little bit to crowd in, but it comes in on its own. But any others who have different opinions?
Not a different opinion, but something that I would like to add here, because since Charu mentioned that there are other signals, so there's like an example that in our sector has seen recently, and that is the opening up of geospatial policy. That is a game changer, and we at Transerv strongly believe that that is going to change a lot of things in near future. Storing and processing of geospatial information on private servers is something that the country was yearning to see for a long time, and I think that is a game changer. That is a big signal that the government has sent.
Thank you. I let my boss know. He's spent a few sleepless nights trying to get that through. Right. So I'm being told that we have to wrap up in a few minutes. I would want to go through all the panelists once more and ask if there are any burning thoughts that they wanted to share but were unable to. Or maybe this time, because it's the last few minutes, something that you really want to rebut one of your co-panelists on. So not this much consensus.
Perhaps I would like to start here, because there's this one thought that I also wanted to discuss with the panel, and that is about the scale. I mean, we as a company have seen a plenty of opportunities to pilot and demonstrate the technology, and see a lot of things, show a lot of things to our possible customers. The scale is what is also a challenge. And if we are thinking about creating an ecosystem for startups in this space, how do we ensure that the necessary scale comes in? Because that would be the only thing that would attract more and more investors to invest in this space. How do we enable scale is something that
I can Raj, I can agree with that. That is, see, either you pick a city and do different kinds of stuff. Like, I mean, let's say out of 1,000 problems of a city, you try to solve at least 500 of them, right? So city can see an impact. See, what happens is that I think we are in a bubble right now. I'm hoping the bubble will grow and become like any other industry. Right now, I think just a handful of us are talking these things and startup and innovation and whatnot. It's a very like a seminar mode we are still in, right? No matter how much money is probably going to startups, I'm not an expert on that. So I think we need to scale, and it's not going to be an easy thing because most cities, if let's say Antara or somebody walks in, there'll be nobody to engage with you first of all, and there are very few people who may understand. There's a lot of time and effort it takes to figure out what you're talking about in the first place, right? What narrow technology are we talking about, and then the person has to engage with you to figure out what exists in the system, what is integration, what is data. So I think we shouldn't underestimate the challenge which we're facing, and this is why I keep saying that focus on a few cities where there is some reception. Put in all your eggs, don't put it all into one city, obviously, but at least a few receptive cities of different sizes, maybe. And otherwise, what happens is that there will be frustration on both sides. So, for example, GIS is a good example. By time I've been struggling to get the GIS data out into the public, and I'm sure other cities are. But then each of these problems are going to be a Herculean task getting it done. And unless we have a lot of focus from a lot of investors and startups and so on, they'll be like less than a drop in the bucket. And you won't be able to show progress. We won't be able to show progress. We may have an innovation hub, but then somebody comes and says, okay, what did you do in the last 2 years? It'll be very difficult for us to say what exactly we did, right? So I think this kind of a group may want to kind of come together and say, okay, let's focus on a few cities on many different problems, and because the entrepreneurs are going to face very similar problems, civics-like organizations are going to face very similar problems. And one good thing I've learned from the last 5 years of Smart City is that if you do something in one city, other cities and leaders are able to pick it up and run with it. So, for example, when Indore did climate carbon credit, it inspired everybody else, right? So till then, it was like a theoretical topic. Similarly, sorry. So the point is that I think we need to focus on one or few cities and deliver some scale in terms of the areas and in terms of the depth at which we are solving the problem. So I think if we don't do that, we'll end up spreading ourselves so thin that year after year we won't be able to show much progress. I think progress, not for the sake of technology, but to motivate each other. Because what is lacking a lot also is motivation. I mean, it's not the technology, it's not the money. I think we need to be able to show progress so that it inspires more officials and startups and investors to come together. So I think we need to show some serious progress in the near 6 months to a year in a few cities. That would be my concluding.
Absolutely, point very well taken. And to the Smart Cities team, listening to this, I think there is going to be a trade-off between the number of pilots versus the scale of pilots. Maybe some joint pilots of a specific technology solution across a few cities can pave the way. It'll give you those early wins, those early successes, which inspire others to try out new things. Absolutely, very well taken point. And we are starting with 12 to 15 cities, but that's just about getting the methodology on. I think it's also about how we divide those pilots across those 12, 15 cities, which are geographically diverse in sizes, different sizes. Absolutely point well taken. I thought somebody else was going to speak. Sorry.
I just wanted to add to that point. I think as Mr. Cherubal mentioned, there is a lot of capacity for us to, as startups, as young organizations in this space, to also work together and feed off each other's wins in the way that we are able to be allies in how we're approaching city problems, because they are complex and need a lot of multi-pronged approaches to actually to solve. One of the key things there that some of us are working on, and I would also encourage other startups to think about, is outside of your core technology pillar, is there aspects, components, certain specific competencies that you can make open source? I know a lot of nonprofit or technology organizations working in this space do make their entire code bases MIT accessible, but there may be certain parts, say for example, when it comes to authentication, or when it comes to smaller pieces of the puzzle that are not core to your core business model. Are you able to make those open source to actually add back to the public commons in terms of what is available for other innovators to build upon in the future? That's one way I think that we also come closer to building for legacy solutions. You don't have to solve all the problems on your own. Some of them have already been solved, and you have the opportunity to take that code and actually build upon it. And I think that's something that also needs to be encouraged.
Thank you. Very, very sensible recommendation there. Absolutely. Okay, between Charu, Madhushri, and Amarj, I think I'll have to choose one of you because we really are running out of time. So, last burning thoughts. If not, let me take a moment to thank all of you for your ideas. This is, of course, a chance to attract and invite more startups to think about putting their technologies, putting their offerings on CIX, and the SmartProcure system allows cities to engage with you more effectively, faster, and in more customized ways for each city. So on National Startup Day, the first National Startup Day, I invite all of you to think about how you and I and the government together work to improve our cities, our fellow citizens' lives. Very big thank you to all my fellow panelists for sharing their thoughts. And this is again a beginning of a conversation. All of us are working at these problems from different aspects, and India needs all of us to work together to propel ourselves into the League of Nations where we want to be. So thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for your ideas. We'll keep talking, and please continue your amazing work to improve India's cities. And thank you for the team putting this together.
Thank you,
Thanks to all
everyone.
the panelists